Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us after lunch for this panel on bridging Web 2 and Web 3. My name is Jamie Crawley. I'm a news reporter for Coindesk. I'm very glad to be joined by, in order, James, Eric, and Vlad. I'll come to each of you individually. You can provide your own little introduction, but I'll give you a lead-off question to be working with. James, starting with yourself. I'll start in some ways. I'll start at the end, if that makes sense. The end goal of a Web3 platform or application. How do you think that would differ from Web 2?
Thanks for having me. My name's James Tromans. I'm the Managing Director of Google Cloud's overall digital asset and Web3 business. So I lead product engineering, strategy and ops, and it's a pleasure to be here. We started this effort about 18 months ago, but we've been working in the Web3 space for many years before that. I think we first put data into BigQuery, which is our analytics database, back in 2017-18, Bitcoin data and others. So to answer your question, sort of how does the end application of Web3 differ from Web 2? I think, well, really the question is kind of what's the difference between Web 2 and Web 3? Ultimately, the difference is about users having choice around how they look after their data. I don't think there's any disagreement about the value that brings to consumer choice and what folks can do with their own data. But with that said, I think that there will be an ongoing space for both what we call today traditional Web 2 businesses and Web 2 business models, in addition to the advent of new business models in the Web 3 space, both in financial services and well beyond. And we'll see that continuum for a long, long time. And I think the two will coexist borderline indefinitely by design.
Thanks, James. Unfortunately, I started with a mistake. I would be remiss of me if I didn't ask you to send your questions into Slido, and we will try and address some of those throughout the course of the panel. Eric, coming to you next. Again, tell us a bit about your involvement in between Web 2 and Web 3. And for your opening remarks, I'd like to ask a little bit about some of the other fundamental shifts that one might deal with when straddling the two, to do with open source technology, addressing interoperability of different blockchain platforms and other considerations you might have.
Yeah, so I guess I'll use this mic. So my name's Eric Turner. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Messari. Messari is a crypto market intelligence platform. So we provide information and research to everyone from builders in the space, custodians, exchanges, large tech companies and financial institutions looking to get into the Web3 space, basically anything you could imagine on the data and research side. So when I think about Web 2 versus Web 3, I think, first of all, that was a great breakdown of the difference between Web 2 and Web 3. I think they're made of words, but that's neither here nor there to some degree on how we brand it. It's all technology at the end of the day. So I think when you look at some of the fundamental challenges when we have large institutions or Web 2 companies approaching Web 3, it's rarely a technical challenge as much as it is a internal cultural challenge, legal and risk challenge, and a regulatory challenge. So I think at the end of the day, blockchain technology can be pretty understandable. I think that if you're looking to migrate or build migrate a Web 2 business or build a Web 3 business on a blockchain, there's a lot of information to help you out there, a lot of education. I think where the challenges come into play is helping organizations understand the actual differences from, again, a risk perspective, a legal perspective. We talked about capital markets, what the difference is if you have something like a bond or some sort of asset freely trading on an open network, or a blockchain where there is the ability that maybe somebody that you didn't mean to sell that asset to can interact with it, especially with composability and DeFi and all these things we have now. So I know we'll get into it a little bit more, but I definitely think it's one of those things where if you asked me about 3 to 4 years ago, the problem would have been the technology. I think that's less and less the case now. And I think it's more of, just it's really helping people understand the differences of how these things are going to manifest themselves once they are on a blockchain or an open source network.
Thanks, Eric. And lastly, coming to Vlad, thank you for joining us, stepping in so that we are 4 and not 3. I suppose what I'd like to pose to you is your take on one of the most fundamental aspects of Web3 as compared to Web2 is in the integration of smart contracts as compared to using intermediaries. Share us some thoughts about that by way of an introduction of yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Vlad. I started with Charlie Crypto Compare, which is CCData now, about 10 years ago. We were the leading data provider in the institutional digital asset data space. We aggregate data across all exchanges, whether it's spot, futures, options, or DeFi. We integrate with multiple chains and pull data, find swaps, and try to... Price discovery sounds like a simple thing. It is a complicated thing. So we try to make that simpler. We try to simplify that. And we're essentially a middleman, right? To your question, like what happens with middlemen? I think generally you need a transition space. Like look at, for example, all the governance of most of the protocols. That happens in Web3 essentially, whether it's on Discord or any other social, assuming Web2 is social interaction and social networks. The governance on most of the protocols still happens in Web2. Humans still communicate in Web2. Web3 is more on the machine side, right? So once you want to optimize and maybe take humans out of the loop, Web3 is amazing. But we're still using a ton of Web2 tools to centralized Web2 tools, right? Intermediaries to communicate as humans. I do see a scenario in which intermediaries become less prevalent because that's what we're all going towards. So from us working with oracles and publishing data on chain and other similar things. But in the foreseeable futures, I think intermediaries still play an important role as you're slowly migrating from them.
It's one of the it's almost takes me to my next question is almost the habits that are the hardest to sort of unlearn or to break, which I'll come back to you with that, James, because the fundamental aspect that we think of Web3 is, in theory, you're putting ownership of data back in the hands of the users and taking it from that of centralized providers like Google Cloud. So tell me a bit about your thoughts on that, the extent to which that's a hard thing to unlearn, the rules of the game changing a little bit.
Yeah, so just for the record, Google Cloud as a business doesn't hold any consumer information. Obviously, Alphabet or Google would be the entity that does that. So if any business stores their data in Google Cloud, it's their data. We don't access it. The customer can bring their own encryption keys, so on and so forth. So it's a well-trodden path working with healthcare and finance where we've had to do a good job there. I think businesses are going to still need your data. I mean, they're going to still need to know where to ship stuff. They're going to still need to know whether you pay your mortgage on time. They're still going to need to know whether you've had an illness, if they're going to give you health insurance. So, putting aside zero knowledge proofs just temporarily, we're still going to need to share our data with the businesses that we do, business with. The question is, will individual businesses have large numbers of users' data? And my argument would be if they're offering a great customer service and doing, adding value, customers will want to give them their data because they're going to give them something in return. So, how that actually unfolds, we'll have to wait and see. It's a competitive environment, and I think the advent of distributed ledger technology and Web3 more broadly is going to help drive that forward. But I don't believe that we're going to suddenly see that, businesses won't hold your data. I put a little asterisk against zero-knowledge proofs. I do think that this technology is particularly relevant in financial services and Web3 more broadly, because the idea that you're going to put option contracts on chain and have the counterparties and the strike price and the notional and so forth visible to everybody makes no sense. So if we're going to live in a world where we put these types of deals on chain and not on a centralized exchange who has the responsibility of keeping that information safe and private, then we're going to need additional privacy-preserving technologies that perhaps aren't in production at scale being used today to solve for these problems. And zero-knowledge proofs may be one way to achieve that. I also think, though, that this is relevant in healthcare. I think this is relevant in other industries where a lot of the investment we've seen go into Web3 over the past few years, and obviously much of that has shifted to AI recently, will bear fruit that isn't just speculation on token prices. It's going to bear fruit on how we do multi-party computation. It's going to bear fruit on how we do zero-knowledge proofs. And these are things that will actually have wider applicability outside of just applied to blockchain, right? We're going to see them and used in other places, and that's going to add value. So for me, Web3 is much more than just blockchain and centralization of data. I think there's a lot of things that are going to come out of it.
And further to that, you mentioned at the top of your answer, a very interesting point that you mentioned, how what will remain key is the user experience. I just want to come back to you on that, if I could, Vlad.
Yeah.
Insofar as, if Web3 platforms, applications, they need to solve certain challenges, but what won't necessarily change is the importance of that end user experience. A point I've always made about various things to do with crypto or blockchain is ultimately we want to get to a point where it doesn't matter if it's crypto. Effectively, one day could just be money. Similarly, it won't be blockchain technology. It's just technology. It's not Web3. It's just the web.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
Yes, obviously, but I feel like we're being in the crypto industry for so long, we're good at punishing ourselves for bad UI without looking at how banking works and how other UIs work. We don't necessarily build bad user interfaces. We're trying to do, as you said, complicated things in the background and exposing too much on the user interface, right? And you go to the bad UX and UI of say onboarding on a bank, which is not easy because you have to, right? There's a clear use case for you as an individual. If I don't contribute, if I don't open an account, I won't be able to financially participate in the in industry. So I think UX UI should definitely hide the complexities. You shouldn't care what you're dealing with in the background, as you said. It should just work, ideally. It should be decentralized. So you're looking at, because we're looking at what SPV wallets for Bitcoin in 2016. And you can still do simple verification wallets. You don't have to have the full chain. That's what everyone is trying to do. That's where the Web3 part comes in. But there's still, where do you store all the data? How do you run? You don't really want to run all the blockchains on everyone's phone. You want to run a part of it that is relevant to the user, and they don't even need to know, right? It's ideally built into Android and built into iOS, and you just have an interface. The same way you talk to the file system, you talk to signature providers, and it happens naturally. And the flow is, because we've been trying to, on the UX side, I don't know if I'm really answering the question, but I'm going with it. On the UX side, we've been trying to constantly build UIs on top of operating systems that generally don't work like that. So we're trying to kind of force the crypto UI instead of being a platform approach where Android and iOS just support the signatures and support things that we use a lot in the digital asset industry. So I think that's where the big innovation is going to come from, working at platform level and having default components that everyone is used to interacting with instead of everybody trying to fix it themselves. Maybe.
Go ahead, Eric.
I have some thoughts there. So
Yeah.
I'll get some spiciness in this panel. I actually, I disagree that we should compare ourselves to things like banking UI, because I actually think, we use this as an excuse a lot. Technology's new. Look at how banks operate. Look at the mainframe systems that they use. Look at, COBOL and all these outdated programming languages. And sure, that's how the back end runs. But we're talking about bridging Web 2 and Web 3. We're talking about bringing everybody into this space and allowing them to use these applications. So, when I look at, let's use banks for an example, right? I think banking UI is incredible. I can go sign up for multiple bank accounts right now. I type in some basic information. Brokerage accounts, the same thing. My name, my address, my social security number. It's easy. I can open an account. It's approved in 60 seconds. On the back end of that, I am filing tax forms with the IRS or whatever your government regulator is. I am going through KYC. I am going through all of these checks. All of this stuff is being done in 60 seconds to set up one of these accounts. So, when you compare us to banks, sure, you can make those excuses. A lot of the legacy systems from 50 years ago, they're broken, but Web 2 financial services are way ahead of us in terms of user experience right now. And I think that's the problem that we need to solve if we do want to actually bring, everybody that's in this Web 2 world into Web 3. And that's the next million, billion, whatever that number is, users that you think are coming into the space.
It's a great point, Eric. When I think about my last experience of opening a bank account online was incredibly straightforward. My experience of setting up an account with a crypto exchange by comparison was bloody difficult. I'm not going to say who it was. James, let's come back to you, because in terms of, to Eric's point about what Web3 would carry over, the continuum of Web 2 into Web 3, and a point I've heard you make previously is that not all folks will going to want to manage their own private keys. So the issue of self-sovereignty, that's a continuum that will still include Web 2 components.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, this idea, I love this because I agree. I mean, I think when I signed up for my neobank in the UK, super quick, could it be better? Yeah, maybe. Maybe I already hold a credential in my wallet that has all of that information. I don't have to type anything in. Back in the good old days when you could have that auto form completion add-on to your Netscape browser. But the idea that, you have that credential in your wallet, you bear that credential, and the verifying entity, the bank that you're signing up with, is just like, got it. This is a digitally signed credential. I trust the information that you're providing to me. It's cryptographically signed all the way back. Yeah, so you maybe can shortcut that 60 seconds to 5 seconds or something. But that's like fine tuning. I agree that the user experience, as it were, can be improved a lot. And this links to, if we're going to onboard 1 billion users, if there are folks in the audience that are working in this space that want to operate at Google's scale, you can't do this by ignoring all the well and hard-earned lessons of what's gone in the past, right? Like all those lessons from Web 2, they don't just go away when we're trying to build Web 3 things. And, people forget their passwords. People need to have, help logging in. People write things down in little books. People have these different habits. And so we need to recognize that that's human nature and it's going to take generations to change. And so we need something that's going to help bridge that gap to help these folks on board. And they we talked about it's just the web again. It's not Web 2, Web 3. When you're using your bank now, you don't know you're using HTTPS or TCP/IP. That would be madness if you had to know that level of detail. So the neobank of the future may be operating on crypto rails with verifiable credentials to help sign up quickly, but the user's not going to know any of that. Right? They don't need to know the technical implementation details. They're just going to have a fantastic experience, and they're going to, with that, have additional new experiences that they couldn't have before because they might own more of their own data and have that as something that they can take with them elsewhere to sign up for new services. So yeah, I do think that the lessons learned and the things that we've done in the Web 2 space are going to transition into Web 3. But I also don't think Web 3 is ready to absorb all of the Web 2 use cases. So, Web 3 is not ready to absorb everything on chain right now at scale. We'd need a 10 million TPS blockchain to do global retail payments all on chain. And yeah, I think that is the aspiration, but we're definitely not there now. So, there's lots of advent that needs to keep happening across the board. And the things that we've done in Web 2, I think, are going to inspire that.
So we're not there yet. I think we'd all agree with that. How do we get there?
Well, my solution was to convince the platforms to provide signatures and provide actual interactive frameworks for developers to build apps on top of. Right, a good example. We've got solutions for all of this. Like, it's not that we don't know technically how to do it. It's that it's complicated to get people to, hey, back up this password and put it somewhere because it's your responsibility. So then you've got wallets like Argent that are trying to do shard your key to common friends that you know. So you build a trust circle. So there are solutions, and similar with scaling. We've had the Lightning Network for ages, and limited usage or limited uptake in usage. Mostly because the argument that I was trying to make with UX on banking, whether it's horrible or not, you do it because you have to, because otherwise you are not included you have to open a bank account, right? We don't have that for crypto. You don't have to have a crypto account or any sort of private key for something. Like, there's not that big thing. Hey, listen, I can't do it anywhere else unless I do it here. There was a case in ICOs, and then everybody opened accounts because they assumed they would make money. There was a case, so there was a lot of speculation. Most of the use cases were speculation related that drove a ton of adoption. We're still looking for, and I've said this 10 years ago on a similar panel when we started. We're still looking for the big thing besides yes, it is a token that is not inflationary, that will hold value. What is the next thing we're building of smart contracts? Because it can't just be financial instruments, because they're not that exciting, right? That just happens in the background. You've got an investment advisor. You've got somebody handles it for you, and I guess, just to get it off my chest, on the banking UX, yes, nice, very much survivor bias. Try to emigrate and then open a bank account and then have your bank account closed because you're running a crypto business, and have your business deplatformed, and then you will. That's a clear use case of why I would learn, and I would try to start using Web3, because that's my only option, right? It wasn't the case. We partnered with Barclays, and it was all fine in the end. This was 5-6 years ago, but I still feel like there's no. So to answer your question, what is the next big? What is adoption gonna? What is gonna drive adoption? It's something that you can't do in a centralized manner. It's not because you can't do it because you have to trust somebody. It's because it's very close to impossible to do. So it's new use cases, because we've been very good at adapting existing things, right? Options, futures, everything, all the financial instruments, everything that we're building on chain is 1920s technology just ported over, or things that we've tried to do with a lower barrier of entry, because you don't have to register, or you didn't have to register with all the regulation that came on board. There has to be something more than speculation, right? And it probably is. We'll find out by the end of the panel, maybe.
I just want to say, I think every few years or every few months, I need a reminder of why we're in this industry, and you just did that, right? I think
Thank you.
the fact that you were debanked, the fact that, I'm sitting here talking about how seamless and great the banking experience is because there's just a massive database this bank owns of my data, and all of these regulations that are forcing me to go through that bank. What happens when that doesn't work, right? And that's why we're trying to figure out how we bridge Web 2 and Web 3, because we want to have that ownership of our assets, of our data. And I also think that gets to your point, how do we bring everything from Web 2 to Web 3? We probably don't want to, right? I don't think everything from Web 2 needs to come to Web 3, but I think that was an incredibly powerful point, and that's why we're all here.
Yeah. Just sticking with you, Eric, actually. Sorry, James, you're chomping at the bit. I can tell. Don't worry. Existing businesses that have got significant investment in existing infrastructure, the kind you were talking about, Eric, and like I said, not all of that needs to make the transition. But it's obviously unrealistic that businesses are going to completely throw it away anyway. So how do we help that transition, and also how do we know what will need to make the transition and what won't?
Yeah, I have a quick thought here, and then I actually think James might have some thoughts as well. I'd love to hear from your perspective, but I think going to a business and saying this is going to make things a little bit more efficient, you might save a little bit of money here, and you're going to have to move your entire tech stack over to this new blockchain, isn't compelling. I just don't think it's really what's going to get us from where we are to where we want to be. Again, it gets back to what this panel has been. What is on the other side of that transition? What is the business case for you? Why should you be doing this? Are you going to get new users? Are you going to build new products? If you're in finance, are you going to be able to use all the composability of DeFi to do something really cool? But some of this backend stuff where we're going to ask people to move a legacy system onto a public network. I just don't see it. And I think we were talking about this earlier, and you throw in the mess of having to manage tokens for transaction fees and all these things that these institutions aren't familiar with. You're really going to need to couple the fact, yes, things should be on chain. We can make the case they're more efficient at the end of the day. They're going to save you money. But what's on the other side of that as a business? Because at the end of the day, businesses want to make money, and that's how you're going to push change.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts. I think, firstly, when it comes to we shouldn't put everything in the Web 2 world on chain. I mean, obviously, this is a lot of the conversations are painfully technology in search of a problem, right? Whether that's a business problem or a consumer-related problem. And that's obviously still disappointing that we're waiting for the killer app for this technology to really be useful. And I held that view, back in 16, 17, 18, and I used to work at Citi back then, and I would advise on some of the investments that the capital markets part of Citi was doing in the space. And I became known as like, James, you don't need blockchain for that, Tromans, because I was like AI now. Like, it was just shoehorning the technology into any problem that could vaguely make sense. And unless you have a double spend problem and you need a trustless network, you technically don't need a blockchain, right? Like, at the end of the day. And so there are many things we do in our daily lives where we don't need blockchain. But then if we expand to the idea of users owning their own data, and I do want to reiterate, I think the verifiable credential stack that the W3C have been working on is really cool in this regard. It's a bit like soulbound tokens if you're an NFT fanatic. And this area is going to lead to a lot of new things in the future. But the idea that everything that currently exists today is going to need to exist in the blockchain space is stupid. And I was at Citi when cloud came, and then I eventually joined Google, and I've seen the transition of large organizations to public cloud, and that was hard and still ongoing. And I still think there's a ton of work to be done there, and that hasn't happened or even got close to being completed. And we're talking about something that's even less clear to these organizations about how Web3 and blockchain will work for them. So no, they're not going to make that transition and just down tools on what they were doing before unless they can realize new revenue streams and get access to new things that they weren't doing before. I have relaxed my view that it doesn't have to be a double spend problem and the permissionless network for blockchain to be useful. And the James, you don't need blockchain for that, Tromans, has now become, well, blockchain offers a set of standards that people can rally around. And if you think about getting a bank, within a bank, a large tier 1 bank, even having a common representation of a trade, they don't have that, right? They still have multiple representations of a trade. They can't agree on standards even within a bank. So how can we expect large organizations of any industry to agree on standards unless we have standards enforced upon them? And in some ways, blockchain technology is that lowest level of building block that enforces some type of standard that people can then build from. And I actually see a lot of value having come from that now, years later, where actually it's okay to have maybe a semi-public or semi-permission network that is driving out operational cost with the possibility of new revenue streams and a better top line in the future doesn't mean that it has to be all things to everybody right away. So I do see that transition from Web 2 to Web 3 being one of a journey. And I think it's okay where, there's 10 ways to solve a programming problem. There's 50 languages you could do it in. I think blockchain is a good fit for many problems now. And that's a nice starting point. But this idea that it is technology in search for problems still rings true. Like you, I've been involved in this space for 10 years. I think that Bitcoin, in a way, stands alone as a store of value and good rails. But in terms of what we can move on chain from a smart contract standpoint that you couldn't do otherwise, that could, must be decentralized, I'm still looking, right? I'm still waiting.
Well, sorry, I know you have other questions, but because spicing things up, right? I disagree a bit with everything has to be Web 2, because when I was in school in the 90s, we learned programming by doing applications that didn't have a server component, right? My running app doesn't need to, like Samsung Health, doesn't need to go and let Samsung know that I'm running. I have it on my phone. If I want to back it up, I can press a button to back it up. It doesn't. I think one of the good things that blockchain brought, whether it intentionally or intentionally, is I've seen a lot of younger developers going, you don't need a server for that. You just write an app that runs on your phone. It doesn't need to talk to a server. And that is, in my view, also Web3, right? So there are more things that can move that way because it is decentralized. Everybody has their own data that is private to you and your phone and your backup system, right? Because assuming you back it up somehow. And there's been, I think the vast majority, I'll let you in a second. This is I know it is very ironic from a centralized data provider, right? We are a centralized data provider. But we're solving a different problem, right? Data access and discoverability is a different problem from privacy. So I think we are moving more things into the Web3 space if you account for things that don't talk to a server as Web3. They don't have to be on chain necessarily. They don't have to be anywhere. That's the whole point. They can just be your data, your phone, whatever.
But when you back that data up, that was the minute I kind of felt that you are using a server, because
you are, yeah.
Once you back data, I mean, you've got high availability of data, meaning if one server dies, another one can take over. You've got latency, throughput, all of those things. If you're storing data just on one device, obviously it's not redundant, and so you back it up to Google Cloud. Or you back it up.
You back it up. You back it up.
You're using a Web2 service provider for the backup.
You are for the backup, but I think fundamentally it is a different value proposition. I am backing up my encrypted data to a Web2 data provider, and it is encrypted and you can't access it, to I am intentionally giving you data that you can harvest. Not you specifically, right? This is not Google related. This is everyone, including us, right?
Other cloud providers are available. Right, we've got a few minutes left, so a final question, and I'll let you kick off this one as well, James, and then we'll go down the line, and then maybe come back to yourself with the final word. So we live in a world of societies and cultures and laws and regulation. I think you were sort of touching on this as well, about how this might be. You can't dictate this sort of Web3 transition. It's got to sort of happen organically.
Right.
And as I say, to a point, to the end goal of onboarding a billion users, as you alluded to before.
Right.
So how do we enable this?
So look, I think if you're a full-on Web3 degenerate and you believe in, and I don't mean this disparagingly, I mean if you really are on board with the full decentralization of everything, very much the politics and the philosophy of what Web3 means, then it's really hard to reconcile that view with the fact that you probably live in a society that already has norms and laws and regulations to protect, and you might not like them, right? That might be part of why you like Web3 so much. You also have the challenges of, maybe you have your bank account closed, which is obviously a real problem as well, but the bank account was closed because of these rules and regulations or whatever that the banks feel like they need to abide by. So we're not like living in a world devoid of these existing things. We need to be building technology that can obviously force the dialogue forward, but also be sensitive to where it has to operate. And that's going to mean, Google and any other, international business will always operate by the laws of the regions and the jurisdictions that it's in. And I think that that's true for citizens, right? We all have to operate in the laws where we're living. And so the technology needs to be sensitive to that. So that means then that if you're an institution looking at distributed ledger technology and how it can do something for your business, you're obviously not going to change your risk posture just because you think this technology is interesting. Similarly, if you're a private citizen who wants to start owning digital assets, you're going to need to pay tax on the capital gain, perhaps on the appreciation of that digital asset. These things aren't going away. So all the technology that we build needs to recognize that this is there and we can't just ignore it. Otherwise, it won't be successful and it's going to get suffocated. And I do worry sometimes that the youthful optimism of Web3 has missed the mark with respect to that early education of the institutions that previously existed, both regulatory, government, business-wise, to help bring that forward earlier than we have now. I think it's happening now, but it would have been great if this was happening 10 years ago at the level it's happening now.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I mean,
another question or something?
It was the same question. The point I wanted to sort of make was, I suppose, to use that point of laws and regulation, there will always be jurisdictions. We like the idea of like some sort of global harmonization around those things, but different jurisdictions are going to go at different paces. We've got different legal systems, we've got different regulatory structures. There will always be some which adopt regulation in a slightly different way, to which companies will say, well, that's the kind of jurisdiction we want to operate in. Let's go and work there. And then that jurisdiction gets the advantage. And then others may, and that by whatever means, because companies are saying, we'd like to come work with yourselves, but you haven't really got the regulation that this place has. Is there anything you can do about that? Go ahead, Eric. Tell me where I'm wrong.
I mean, I agree with you in terms of where we are as a world today. I think you have multiple jurisdictions competing for, Web3 talent and people building out Web3 businesses. I know we're running low on time, so, my quick take there would be those are short-term games. I don't think it's going to matter in the long run. I think if this industry is successful, any country, jurisdiction, whatever it may be, will need to have regulations that address the Web3 space. People can hop jurisdiction to jurisdiction, try to set up and, have the most favorable terms, but this is decentralized technology and it doesn't really have borders. So, you're going to need to adapt to that. And I think it's, we talked about like laws and social norms. I'm more on the degenerate side where I do think that, having these open global networks are actually pushing laws and regulators and social norms to change a little bit faster than they might have. So I think that's a good outcome. I'm from the US, so wait to see what's happening there. But hopefully things are a little bit more favorable.
Yeah, and on the same topic, we've talking about Web 2 and centralization and governments are massive central entities, right? The government doesn't need to. This is a bigger debate, not Web3 related, but generally, talking about blockchain and talking about privacy and like all the subjects that we've been promoting, like the good subjects that we've been promoting in the digital asset industry, I think they're starting to catch on, and people are starting to realize maybe you don't need the efficiencies you get from centralization, like from leading everything from London. Maybe you can still oversee-ish, but you can have your local community think about things, and that's where we come in, because you've got the tech to do it now. Previously, it would have been send a message, get somebody a town crier to announce that whatever constituency is doing what they need. Now it's just a signature on chain, and it's the local community. So I think Web3 and the decentralizing things isn't just for finance. I think it's generally, we've got the technology to build a nicer way of interacting with each other. And obviously we're seeing the horrible aspect of interacting with each other with all the scams and everything that has been going on, but we're working them out, right? You eventually get over all the, you either regulate or build immunity within the community, or build immunity within the higher community, right? Within the world. Oh, I recognize the scam because it's a Ponzi scheme. Now everybody knows what a Ponzi scheme is, and it's not going to work next time, hopefully, for a generation or two. So I think there's a good ending to this, and Web3, whether it is blockchain, or whether it is more privacy, or whether it is, depending on how you define it, we've got the technology to do it, which we didn't have before. This is exciting.
And then just to wrap up, that was your point before, Eric, that a few years ago, this conversation would have been about how we get the technology in place. And from listening to you three, it seems that part we can put a bit of a tick next to. And it's all the other stuff, which I want to thank you all three for, because I think I'm sure you'll all agree some really interesting points there. And I thank you for your attention, and gentlemen, thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Thank you.